Greetings, I'm the Bulgarian Troglodyte. Today I'm gonna talk about the gaps in my cinema knowledge. So I've wanted to make this video for quite a long time, but this morning when I went for a walk, I decided that, I'm gonna do it today. So I haven't prepared much for the video, so I'm gonna do this video with the stream of consciousness way that I usually do my videos with. So we'll see how this goes. But this is a topic that I think about a lot and often, so I think I should be able to make a decent rambling video about this topic even without much preparation and even without any notes. So I think most of us cinephiles have lots of gaps in our knowledge, even though there are some of those kind of prodigies that you see in Letterboxd, for example. There are those like teenagers who have already seen like thousands and thousands of art house movies, and they are like finishing the sight and sound lists and Letterboxd 250s, and they've seen kind of most of the great films from the great directors, the canonical directors, and I'm always kind of in awe when I see people like that who have just seen so much at such an early age. And even sometimes I get comments like that from many viewers, because many of my viewers are way older than me, in their like middle age years or maybe even elderly years, and they sometimes say to me that, you've seen so much even though you are in your 20s. But believe me, there are so many people who are way younger than me and who have already seen like thousands of films more than me, even though they are like 10 years younger than me, or sometimes even like a dozen years younger than me. Yeah, you can find those insane prodigy cinephiles in Letterboxd if you look for them. Yeah, I've followed some of them and throughout the years, and it's been very interesting to see that there are people who are so young and so knowledgeable already. And many of those people watch like 1,000 films a year, some of them even more. But I think there is a kind of a downside to that as well, that if you watch 1,000 plus movies a year, then you won't have any time for other things in your life. Of course, these kids probably go to school, and then after school they only watch films, and probably they don't do anything else, because if you watch 1,000 films a year, that's pretty much like 3 films a day. So that's pretty much all the time you have just spent all the time you have on watching films. And then of course, if you are interested in other art forms, you won't have any time for listening to music or reading books and stuff. And as you guys know, I like the idea of consuming different types of art forms and not just focusing on cinema. So if I was watching 1,000 films a year, I wouldn't be able to put any time to music and books and things like that. Although I think if I cut out TV shows completely, then I might be able to get to around 1,000 films a year and then still have time for music and books. But I love watching TV shows so much, so I wouldn't want to cut that out just for film watching, especially because sometimes I think I actually enjoy watching TV shows more than movies. I think with films, they stimulate me more intellectually, and I can learn more by watching films, and I engage with films more kind of intellectually, like I said. But if we talk about pure enjoyment, I think I often get more pure enjoyment from TV shows than movies. But of course, it depends on the movie and it depends on the TV show. Yeah. So I think, again, I'm 28 years old. I just graduated with a master's degree, and I've been able to watch quite a lot of movies. I've been able to engage quite a lot with art, and I'm fairly happy where I'm at with my film watching and with my art consumption and with my intellectual journey at this point. Although at the same time I feel like I could have done way better, and I feel like I often waste too much time on things that like are stupid, like for example, like scrolling stupid stuff in social media or whatever, or watching too much YouTube, or things like that I could use on watching films. So while I'm pretty happy with my cinema knowledge overall, I think I could have done way better. And also I think I've talked about this in the past on my channel too, that I started kind of my proper cinephile journey later than I would have liked to. And I think that was because I again had this mindset as a teenager that I wanted to be quote unquote normal. And I especially had this friend who was kind of obsessed about being normal, and then I kind of modeled my behavior and my interests based on what he was interested in, and that kind of made me get into cinema more seriously kind of later than I probably would have if I wasn't friends with that person. So I think that relationship kind of hindered my development, you could say. But then fortunately, as I grew up and became an adult, I realized that I should just again focus on things that actually interest me. It doesn't matter if other people are interested in them. I should be myself and do the things that I love. And I'm glad that I was able to come to that important realization again later on life. But yeah, I got more seriously into cinema I think when I was like 19, just before I turned 20. And that was kind of the time when I started watching world cinema and more kind of older films. I had seen some before that time, but that was kind of the point when I started getting into cinema more seriously. And what started that was kind of me getting a Akira Kurosawa Blu-ray box set as a Christmas present in 2016. So I was 19 years old then, and that kind of got me into the rabbit hole of starting to watch like the classics of world cinema and the more kind of critically acclaimed classics of cinema, because before that I had watched the kind of normie classics like Nolan and Spielberg stuff, but not really the kind of critical or critic or kind of film historian or cinephile type of classics that I love now and talk about now. Yeah, but that's some history for you. But I guess I've now been a proper cinephile for almost a decade. Not quite a decade yet, but almost a decade. It will be a decade late next year, so that's gonna be great. But during that decade I've been able to watch lots of films. On my best year I watched like 600 plus or maybe even 700 films. It was the first year of the pandemic in 2020, because there was of course more time. I was just graduating from my bachelor's degree. Then again the pandemic started just like a few months before I graduated, so then I kind of had more time because I wasn't seeing my friends anymore, and all the studying I had to do was just on my own at my own apartment and stuff. So that was a time when I was just living and breathing cinema, and I was really trying to challenge myself to watch lots of cinema. And that was a time when I also was able to watch lots of like huge classics and stuff like that, and improve my knowledge on that stuff. But then as time has gone on, after that I've gotten a bit more relaxed with my cinema watching. So these days I don't force myself to watch films. I just watch films when I want to, and that of course means that the number of films I watch a year is way smaller than the 600 or 700 these days. I think I usually watch between like 250, 350. Sometimes it might be a little less or a little more in a year. I mean, this year it probably will be more like 250 rather than 350, but because I've been watching so many TV shows. But we'll see how it goes. But oh god, I've been rambling so much already in this video and not kind of focusing on the topic, but this is my style, so hopefully you get something out of this video. But anyway, maybe we should actually get into the actual gaps now. I've been talking here for 10 minutes without talking about the gaps in my knowledge. Yeah, maybe I'll put some disclaimer in the beginning of the video that yeah, the first 10 minutes is just useless rambling. But anyway, so I have quite lots of gaps in my cinema knowledge, as again most cinephiles do. So I'll kind of mention some countries and continents here and things like that. So of course some of the obvious gaps in my knowledge is like African cinema, and of course it's kind of stupid to say African cinema because of course there are so many African countries and different types of filmmakers from different types of African countries, and of course there are many different types of cultures in Africa. So just saying African cinema, it's of course very broad way to say it, but yeah, but I kind of I'm not very knowledgeable on any type of African cinema, but I have seen some African films throughout the years, so I'm not like complete novice in that topic, and I think maybe I have seen more African cinema than like vast majority of cinephiles, other than people who like really have put effort into it. But still, again, I've only seen very little African cinema, although I think it's not kind of my fault entirely, because of course African cinema isn't very available, although there is more stuff available for me to watch. Like I haven't watched that many of the Sembene films, but I've been meaning to watch them, like Emitai and films like that. But I have seen, I think, maybe a couple of films from Sembene, but I need to watch more. And then again, I have seen films like here and there, but I haven't done like deep dives into any African directors yet. And I've been kind of fairly, I think, how do you say, reliant on what like Criterion has released, for example, and also what I've been able to find on YouTube. And I think, for example, one guide that I have had for this, it has been the Harvard PhD list, because they had like few African films on that list, and I have watched some of them. So yeah, African cinema is something I want to get more into, and hopefully it will become more available in the future, and hopefully there will be more kind of great African filmmakers in the future. Yeah, but then Latin America is the other continent that I need to kind of watch more of their films. I have again seen some Latin American films, although I think most of the films I have seen have been from Brazil, and there are of course many other countries in Latin America, both in again Central America and in South America. So there are probably lots of films from many of those countries that I should check out. And I have enjoyed several films that I have seen from Brazil, for example, so I think I'm gonna find lots of films that I'm gonna like when I get into those films. Yeah, but yeah, my knowledge on again Latin American cinema is very poor, but yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into that more in the future. And then of course there are many kind of also individual countries that I want to explore their cinema more. And one of the big ones is China, and we can also include like Hong Kong and Taiwan in there. And again, as you guys know, I have seen Chinese films. I've seen again quite a few Chinese films, but of course it's a huge country. They've released so many films, and I often come across on Letterboxd like people logging many Chinese films that I haven't seen, and many of those films sound very interesting, and many of them are on my watch list. So Chinese cinema is actually one of my kind of near future plans, that I want to get more and more into Chinese cinema and watch lots of it, both kind of more recent stuff but also older stuff. So yeah, I have seen some Chinese films of course, but not much, especially if we compare my kind of Chinese cinema journey to my Japanese cinema journey, or even my South Korea cinema journey, like it doesn't really compare. I've barely watched like a small kind of fraction of the Chinese cinema that is important. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to watching more Chinese cinema. Of course, Chinese culture in general is very, very interesting, and also of course as China is such a huge country and such a huge influence on the whole world, it's kind of more also very interesting kind of from a philosophical and political standpoint to get into more Chinese cinema and learn more about the culture. And then when it comes to Taiwanese cinema, for example, I have again seen most of the Edward Yang films, most of Tsai Ming Liang's feature-length films, then a good number of Hou Xiaoshen films, then a couple of King Hu films, but then after that, or like beyond those important directors, I haven't really watched much. And even with King Hu, I've only seen Dragon Inn and A Touch of Zen, so I really need to watch more King Hu stuff as well. So I'm really looking forward to also watching more Taiwanese cinema and watching beyond kind of the obvious directors. Yeah. And then of course in Asia there are so many different countries, and I've mostly watched cinema from these kind of obvious countries like Japan and South Korea, and then again China and the related countries. And then India is of course a huge film market, and my knowledge on Indian cinema is very poor. I really need to watch more Indian cinema. I have of course watched some Satyajit Ray, some Ritvik Khattak, then some of the other art house directors that aren't very well known in the West, like Govindan Aravindan and Mani Kaula and directors like that. But even with those two directors, I've only seen I think couple films from each, and they have made quite a few films. Although the problem with many of these kind of art house directors from India is that their films are very poorly available, although sometimes they are available on YouTube, which is really good, and that's kind of how I've watched them, through YouTube and through the Rare Film website, etc. And then when it comes to the more mainstream Indian cinema, the Bollywood stuff, like my experience with that is extremely limited. I've barely seen any of that, so I should also watch some of the kind of more mainstream stuff from India, even though I'm more interested in the artsier stuff like Ritvik Khattak and Satyajit Ray and Guru Dutt and Mani Kaula and Govindan Aravindan and directors like that. And I'm sure there are many other directors that I'm gonna discover in the future. Yeah, so that's another thing. And of course, like there are so many Chinese films, so many Indian films, etc. that I need to watch because they're such huge countries. There are so many films from both countries, so many kind of worthwhile films to watch. So I'm looking forward to getting into the cinema of those countries more and more in the future. Yeah, I'm sometimes kind of too obsessed with Japanese cinema and even like Korean stuff to kind of give time to these other Asian countries. Yeah, even though I should. And of course, even in Europe, there are some countries that I haven't seen any of their cinema, like I think Latvia and Lithuania. I think I haven't seen anything from those countries. For example, I think Greek cinema is something I haven't explored that much beyond like Theo Angelopoulos. And then of course I've seen some Lanthimos films, but most of his films he made outside Greece. Yeah, so Greek cinema is something I want to get more into. And of course there are so many directors, even from the kind of big cinema countries like France and Italy, that I need to explore more, so there are many gaps there as well. And also the kind of Eastern European cinema, of course I've watched a decent amount of like Hungarian cinema and Czech cinema, and I really enjoy the cinema of those countries, for example. But they actually have a very kind of a rich history with cinema, so there is way more for me to check out. Yeah, lots of the stuff that the Second Run Blu-ray label, for example, has put out, there is lots of stuff there that I still need to check out, even though I have checked out quite a lot of it. And the weird thing here is that also my own country of Finland, like my knowledge on Finnish cinema is actually fairly poor. There are some people on Letterboxd who know a lot about Finnish cinema, some like Finnish people there, and I'm kind of amazed how much they know about Finnish cinema and how much they have seen. But I haven't seen that much, and the most embarrassing thing is that I haven't seen a film called 8 surmanluotia, which is in English 8 Deadly Shots, which the Finnish critics always say that that's the greatest Finnish film of all time, and I still haven't seen that. And by the way, guys, that's actually available on the Criterion channel if you want to watch it, because I think the Martin Scorsese World Cinema Foundation actually restored that or something, so who knows, maybe it will come out on a future Scorsese World Cinema box set from Criterion, and that would be really cool. But yeah, you can watch that on the Criterion channel, and I've heard that you should watch the longer cut because there are 2 cuts of it. Yeah, but I have access to that film, but I still haven't watched it, and there are many other films from Finland that I should watch. And then also from that director Mikko Niskanen, who made 8 Deadly Shots, I should also watch more of his films. I have seen, I think, a couple of his other films and they have been good. But the thing with Finnish cinema is that you can find lots of good films that were made in Finland, but it's very hard to find those kind of 5 out of 5 masterpieces. I don't think there has been that many of those in the Finnish cinema history, but there have been some really good ones, and yeah, saw many films that are worth watching, but yeah, it's hard to find those like Tarkovsky or Bergman level of masterpieces from Finnish cinema, other than from like Aki Kaurismäki and stuff. Yeah, so I still need to even educate myself more on my own country's cinema, but it's just that I often prefer to explore other cultures rather than my own culture, and I'm not the most kind of patriotic person, even though I love many things about Finland. But yeah, I should get into Finnish cinema more and explore it more in the future, even though again, of course, I have seen quite a few Finnish films, but compared to some of the other cinephiles from Finland, yeah, my knowledge is very, very poor. And then another thing that I'm pretty poor at is like reading cinema related books. So I haven't really read many kind of film history books or kind of film criticism books or like filmmaker biographies or things like that. Yeah, I've barely read any of that stuff, because of course I read books, like you can see from there, but I tend to kind of separate my reading from my film watching, I guess, quite a bit, so I haven't read much about film. Although of course I've read kind of articles and things like that, so I know about these kind of some of these kind of film history things and film movements and things like that. But my knowledge is on those things is fairly, like I would say, intermediate or whatever. Like it's not very like deep or anything, but I know some stuff. But I should really read more books on cinema. And I have throughout time like saved some stuff to my like wish list to get later on. Like there are a couple of Japanese new wave books that I want to get. One of them is by the critic David Tesser, who did some of the supplements for some of the Arrow new wave box sets, like the Yoshida box set. And then I also have, there was like one Misoguchi book that I have. I think Roger Kirby recommended that on one of his videos or one of the comment sections, I think. So looking forward to getting that at some point. And then there's the Paul Schrader book that sounds pretty interesting, and yeah, there are many others that I can again find when I look more into it. So that's something I want to do at some point in the future, although I'm not sure when I will start getting into film books more. Yeah. And then my knowledge is very poor on kind of the technical elements of filmmaking, so I sometimes hear like cinephiles talking about like different lenses and different cameras and also like different techniques and things like that. So my knowledge on that stuff is very poor. But I want to educate myself on that too a bit more in the future, although I think I'm never gonna be an expert on stuff like that. I think I'm not interested enough in like cameras and things like that to really get into it, but I want to learn more about the basics and things like that to have at least some type of understanding of those things. But currently my knowledge on that stuff is very poor. Yeah. And then maybe final thing is to say is that of course even things that I have explored more in detail, like Japanese cinema for example, there are still so many Japanese cinema for me to explore and so many filmmakers to get into more and learn more about them. So it's really hard to become kind of an expert on anything, because so many of these film topics and film movements are kind of endless rabbit holes that you can get into. Like Japanese cinema for example, I constantly find new stuff still to this day, even though I've been into Japanese cinema for quite a long time and quite intensely. Yeah, still so much stuff to learn and so much stuff to watch. Okay, most of the stuff that I have to watch is like a bit kind of more on the underground, but yeah, I'm very excited to get into that stuff. And also of course I love to rewatch many of these films and kind of get a deeper understanding of individual films and also individual filmmakers. Yeah, because it's not enough to just go through the films like once and then never think about them again, because of course with these kind of great masterpieces you want to watch them many times throughout time to learn more about them, and then as you change as a person your take on the films will be also quite different. So yeah, film watching and being a cinephile is a constant learning process, and that's one of the things that I enjoy about it. Like I love just watching films, but I also love thinking about them, and also I love to kind of connect the films with my own life and try to become kind of again a more empathetic and a better person throughout experiencing these stories very deeply. And that's the case with reading books as well and engaging with stories in general. But anyway, that was such a all over the place video with a very long 10-minute long intro. But I'm very impressed if you made it to the end. Definitely let me know what are some of the gaps in your knowledge, and you can also recommend me films, like for example any Chinese films or films from Africa or South America or Central America or India or whatever country you can think of. Yeah, let me know your thoughts on this topic. I was very much appreciate it, and yeah, thanks for watching. Don't drink Coke at all. Sayonara and arigato gozaimashita.